And I wonder, when I sing along with you, if everything could ever feel this real forever, if anything could ever be this good again. And the only thing I ever ask of you, you've got to promise not to stop when I say when. She sang. This week we're talking about Foo Fighters' second album, The Color and the Shape.
Welcome to the Essential Albums podcast, where three guys from 85 have a conversation about some of the biggest albums ever and forgotten favorites from yesteryear. We'll dig into an album's place in culture, discuss its merits, and decide if a record holds up and is worth your time. So join longtime friends Ryan, Denise, and Gordon as we dive into our favorite albums and relive some of the classics. All right, great job on the intro there, Denise. I was like, I didn't want to look at you because I'm like, he's going for it. I don't want to laugh.
It was so hard to do that without like singing it.
Yeah. But I'm sure you had the words down pat by now.
Yeah. Well, I was reading them still because I didn't want to screw something up and make an ass of myself, messing up the lyrics of one of the most popular songs.
Yeah.
Well, arguably one of the greatest songs of all time. But yeah, I guess, this week we're talking about The Color and the Shape, T-Cats. But this band, Pitchfork has described Dave Grohl and the band as this generation's answer to Tom Petty, a consistent hit machine pumping out working class rock. So, I mean, I think that pretty much sums up the band nicely. I mean, these guys have been around for what, over...
Unless you don't know... Now? Unless like you're a younger person who doesn't know who Tom Petty is, then yeah.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, for three guys from 85, we know who Tom Petty is.
Yes. I saw Tom Petty live, actually.
Yeah, so nice. I mean, Dave Grohl has obviously played with Tom Petty live. Well, I think on SNL, maybe some other shows.
I feel like at this point, I'm pretty sure at this point, Dave Grohl has played with almost everyone. or most people, but yeah.
Yeah, he's got an extremely long list. I did note some of those after, but we can get into it. But I guess the Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl are probably one of the most influential mainstream rock acts of since the mid '90s on, and they've been able to kind of maintain that. How do you guys feel about Foo Fighters? What's your relationship to Foo Fighters?
I would disagree with that statement. I don't think that they're that influential. I think they're pretty big, but I don't think that they're that influential. Like, they have no trends have kind of stemmed from the Foo Fighters. I mean, I think it's partially because the genre that they work in has not been doing so well, since that dang pop music, since disco screwed everything up.
Yeah, but you can make the argument since that time they've sort of filled that void fairly well for the mainstream, especially.
Sure. But in terms of influencing the direction of art, I can't say that I've heard much.
I'll be the bit of a devil's advocate to that, just to say that since rock isn't like the biggest genre that it was back in the 90s, or even as big as it was in the early 2000s, is at a point right now where there isn't many rock acts. So pretty much you have like one big one in every sort of subgenre or whatever you want to call it to kind of fill those voids. And Foo Fighters is definitely that. They're the go-to rock band when it comes to, any sort of like Grammy Award show or someone's being honored that's a rock band. You need to put together a band. You're going to use Dave Grohl, or you're going to use the Foo Fighters. Are going to be part of that. I feel like they definitely filled that void. And for a lot of younger people who didn't grow up in the same era as us, I think they're one of like the only rock bands that they probably even know. So for that thing, we don't know their influence. It hasn't been seen yet, I think.
That's true.
I think I get your point, Ryan, of maybe influence is the wrong word, but I would say they are important because they have been able to kind of maintain, or they just continue to do like alternative rock music or post-grunge, and they've never deviated from that. I mean, that could also be a hit against them, but at the same time, they're the ones kind of keeping it alive in the mainstream. Like if you listen to rock radio, it's like you're guaranteed to hear them.
I think that's why, like, in order to be influential, you have to do something that is kind of outside of the box, outside of the mainstream. Obviously, if it's mainstream, it's not going to be influential because that influence is already in the mainstream. If you to be influential, you have to push the boundaries in some way. And there are some elements where Foo Fighters does play with the boundaries, especially with like different time feel things. I mean, he's a drummer where you'll have like shorter time signatures or different odd time things. But but outside of that, there's not really boundary pushing going on. So
well, we're also attacking the influential question pretty early. It was supposed to be your relationship. I was just sort of trying
to.
Yeah, we can get
all right later. I don't want to spill everything I want to say now, but
fair enough. Enough.
I'll say my relationship. For me, they were when I was first, like mentioned many times in past episodes, it was like 94, 95 that I was kind of getting into rock. And at that point, all the bands I was getting into, like Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam, they all had been around for a few years. Whereas when Foo Fighters hit, like I know Dave Grohl had, he's part of Nirvana, but Foo Fighters is almost like a blank slate for me. So they were like the first band where it's like, I'm right on board right at the beginning. Like I remember when I'll Stick Around first came out, I remember loving that song. That first album was huge. It was, again, one of the first albums I owned. Love that album. And then when this album came out, it was like the follow-up. So, and I was really excited for it. So it was the first band that I really felt like a true connection to, as compared to like the Nirvanas and Pearl Jam that I'd kind of been around for 4 or 5 years, had an album or two under their belts before I even knew who they were, whereas Foo Fighters were brand new. So as like a kid, it was like, it felt a little more special to me for that reason. So in the later years, I didn't listen to them as much, and going back and listening this week was kind of like, oh shit, like some of their new stuff is better than I even remember, because I always I try to stay up to date and listen to everything. But yeah, for me, I was like, start off a big fan, kind of wavered a little kind of in my 20s, but I'd say now I listen to them regularly. When they drop something, I try to listen to it and check it out.
Yeah, I just want to ask you one quick question, quick follow-up to that. When you first heard them, did you know he was from Nirvana, like the drummer of Nirvana? You knew that from go?
There was, at the time, there was like no way around it. Dave Grohl was being asked about it in every interview, to the point that even as a fan watching the interviews, you almost felt the cringe and annoyance for him. Like, stop asking him this. Like, especially by the time The Color and the Shape came out, and he was still being asked. I think I remember there even being like a question on when they had an intimate and interactive on Much Music when this album came out, and I think he was even asked, and he kind of didn't want to answer it. It's like, just don't bring it up.
Yeah.
At that point, like now he kind of talks about it more, but it's been like 30 years or whatever. So
I am guilty of listening to some of the lyrics on this album and wondering, is he singing about Kurt Cobain? I'm definitely guilty of that.
And there's like, that's pretty much all the questions he was being asked. It's like, oh, is this about Kurt? No. Is this about Kurt? No. Is this about, it's like, come on. He doesn't just sit around and write songs about his friend all day.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to get a start, like, it's hard to follow up Nirvana, right? Like, that was, and it's such a mysterious death. I'm not really that mysterious, but there's a legend around it.
Yeah. But also for him, it was that first album he had made, and he was just sort of playing it for people. I believe this is the story that went behind it. That first album he kind of wrote and recorded and was kind of playing it for people, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do. Start a band, just kind of drop it on his own. So he didn't know. And then after Kurt died, it was sort of like, okay, let's try to foray this onto something new. I already have this thing that people are enjoying that I played it for. So you got Pat Smear on board, who is also in Nirvana. And I believe there was even talks of Chris Novoselic being in the band originally, but it was like, we don't want to do like the Genesis thing and sort of replace the singer with the drummer. He kind of said, oh no, maybe this is kind of too weird or whatever. So they found Nate, but yeah, it was unavoidable to even know that information at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just to kind of add on to that, I mean, he was, based on everything that I read this week, he was pretty deliberate in trying to separate himself, even though they did have Pat Smear for a bit at the beginning. But like you said, yeah, Kirst wanted to, they were going to do it together, but then they didn't, just because they didn't want to be associated with Nirvana and grunge.
Yeah.
How about you, Ryan? What's your relationship to Foo Fighters?
I was introduced to Foo Fighters by an old friend of mine, Casey, that you guys know and well. So like he showed me Foo Fighters as like the, oh, this is the drummer of Nirvana's band. It's like it's okay. It's like we'll listen to it because it's Nirvana's drummer. But so, but I mean, for I listened to Color in the Shape first, and I liked parts of it more than others, but when I got their first album, I really fell in love, which is really odd because that's not I don't know what that is. There's something about that first album. There's like a rawness to it. I think he maybe because it is all him and so it is
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
he's younger, taking more risks.
well, with that album, yeah, I agree with you. The production is a little more kind of low budget. It has a more sort of raw, more energy feel. And even just reading stuff about the color and the shape, even the title track for the album, which was later added, which was titled "The Color and the Shape," the reason it wasn't included was because he thought it sounded too much like something that would have been on the first album. So he was trying to grow from that, which makes sense because also at the time music was moving away from that sound. So and he came from a band who was in that who were leading that genre, so it would be weird to sort of stay there. I think that this was the right step to color in the shape to move forward musically. I think
Yeah,
the results are up for to decide if you prefer it or don't prefer it. But if they would have just made a bunch of the first album over and over and over again, you'd run into the same problem, just different type of music.
well, have we just done that with the second album over and over and over again? Or
No,
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 you
no,
haven't.
they haven't. That's true. That's not fair. That's not fair.
Honestly, like listening this week, because since I kind of took everything in like as it came out, and especially like in the later years, it just sort of became something playing in the background. It wasn't something I was diving into. I noticed that like this the swish and the styles for them going through the years, they sort of kind of got stuck in that pop thing for a while. But I think in their last like four releases, they've gotten away from that completely. They're just like a rock band. They've just embraced being like a hard rock band, and I think the results are better. Like I know they still kind of get mediocre reviews for just being a generic rock band, but like there isn't many generic rock bands around, and you can't be generic when you're the only one doing it.
Unless it was done already.
Well, you can say lack of growth, but I'd say listen to it and you be the judge. I don't think their new stuff is that derivative. And
Well,
the albums also vary in style. You get some color in the shape sound, you get some more aggressive songs. They still have songs that sound like they could be on the first album, on newer albums. So I don't know. I feel like they kind of have a bad rap, and I was a part of that. I kind of would have the same arguments, but I feel like this week listening to them again, sort of and going through the career, it's kind of giving me a different perspective on them.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess Gordon, you still got to answer the question, though. But
Well, I'll
We're
answer.
kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but
No, I like I like the conversation, so we can get back into it. I'll answer real quick. I don't remember when I found out that he was the drummer of Nirvana, like because I remember seeing Big Me, that video, and that was like instant classic. I watched it again for the first time in so many years this week, and I was laughing. It's hilarious. But at some point, I learned that it was everywhere, right? So I realized who he was, and in the context of Nirvana. And like with this album specifically, it was probably like the third or fourth album that I bought. So I ended up buying it from like Blockbuster Video, which is a weird thing. They used to sell music back then, but yeah. So that's it's kind of hazy where it is, but I remember it's like one of those kind of quintessential '90s bands that I always kind of followed from the beginning. So that's kind of my relation. And then they're always on the radio. They're, like I said, they're one of the most mainstream rock bands you can talk about. But going back to what you guys were talking about earlier, the first album, just looking real quick, it looks like it's pretty much a self-produced album. And then this one, they intentionally they decided to seek out a producer who would kind of move them more into the poppy stuff, away from that raw sounding stuff. So that's why they got Gil Norton, who produced the Pixies, and he was kind of influential in making the pop music that you hear on this album, like the hard rock with the poppy melodies.
yeah, I was thinking about like after listening to In Utero so much last week, how that's like a more raw sound, and like even the first Foo Fighters album is what the hell is that called? What do we call it?
just self-titled.
Just Foo Fighters? Okay.
Yeah.
And that has a more raw sound, and then it's almost like this is a return to Nevermind a little bit. In the guitar tones, in sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really clean distortion. That's sort of, yeah.
I don't know. This album still gets like, as far as like standards of rock music goes, for especially what we get today, it's still really aggressive. A lot of the songs compared to a lot of the stuff we get today. That you may say the production is clean, but again, it isn't as clean as what we get today. It's still pretty raw sounding. Yes, compared to In Utero, I'd say it's pretty tamed, but it's still a pretty like rockin' album.
No, I didn't mean. I meant clean as like everything is.
Like
Like,
more pop?
I think I know.
It's still heavy. It's still heavy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's not. There's no tension. You know, there's not as much tension. Everything is clearly mixed, and you can hear like even in the softer tracks where there's more acoustic instruments and like clean guitars. Everything's very nicely mixed and produced and everything. It's like almost like mixed more like a. I don't want to say like a classic rock album because it sounds newer than that, but you know what I mean? Because it has a bit of that classic rock vibe going between the hard
I
rock
think
songs and the softer.
it was that I think it was those transition years for the rock music because those early albums from a lot of those bands were, you know, a lot of smaller independent labels, that sort of thing. But then when it became, you know, the main sort of music, you had the Foo Fighters, this album, The Color and the Shape, had that cleaner sound. Even like Silverchair albums moving forward had a cleaner sound. Stone Temple Pilots did. Even when we talked about Pearl Jam, their later albums took the more pop sort of sensibilities along with it. It was just a transition that they were sort of went through. I think part of
Yeah,
it was age and what was going on. But
totally.
funny though that we talk about the one song on the album that I do feel has a very live feel to it though is "See You."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just it's a very different track than anything else on the album, but just sort of the pace of it and everything kind of gives you that
The-
live feel. They even put in like the applause break at
yeah.
the point.
Mhm. Do you
That's a
Yeah.
think
nice fake out.
just going back to what you were saying about like moving away from like the raw sound, more polished or clear sounding, I guess instruments or whatever, is that just like part of the effort to move away from grunge music and like the first half of the decade?
I think that was like, death of Kurt Cobain, and with that like dirtiness, that sloppiness kind of fell out of style. Because I mean, who was doing it?
Yeah, it became a different thing because, and then we started after the late '90s and the early 2000s. We kind of transitioned to the garage rock, which was like a different sort of raw. It
Yeah.
was like more back to basics sort of raw, which a lot of rock stuff, even Foo Fighter stuff in the later years, moved towards that as well because it's sort of everyone went back to basics as opposed to the sloppy raw and sloppy energy of punk music. It went back to more of just a clean rock sound.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it was the indie rock that picked up the Pixies, baton later on
Yeah,
after that garage rock
you
wave.
started getting all the subgenres too, like noise rock and like even post rock stuff. Kind of some of that stuff fell into that, and just everything just became a subgenre. So if you enjoyed Nirvana stuff, you could find like 50 bands are just mimicking that sound.
Yeah, so I guess with that we can probably move on to I guess some more song specific questions from the album. So this album has I guess three legendary singles from it.
Yeah.
It kicked off with Monkey Wrench, Everlong, and then My Hero. So that was all released 97 to 98. So I just remember personally seeing Monkey Wrench, and that was like that video, like that was during my prime, yeah, my prime music video watching days in the 90s for sure. And just like the color I watched it again this week, but like the color when they're in that room, like the red and the dark blacks and stuff, and then their doppelgangers or their twins or whatever are trying to break in and take the room back. Like that's such a classic video.
Just even at the beginning of the video when he walks in the elevator and is playing like the elevator version of Big
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
Great.
That's a good. But I guess I can ask more specifically. What do you guys think is the biggest song from this album?
Well,
What do you think?
I think we
Everlong.
all know this. Yeah, yeah. Over time,
Everlong,
Yeah.
it's that at that point that song is like I don't know, one of the quintessential '90s rock songs. They played it in freaking Friends during Monica and Chandler's wedding. You know what I mean? Like it's such a big song. Like
it is.
their most streamed song on Spotify. It's their most played song on like YouTube. they still perform it. A video came out a couple of weeks ago where he told
Playing
the whole
acoustic,
story
yeah.
of it and plays it acoustic. Like
Mhm.
it's at this point, it's beyond the classic, and it's their biggest song the band's biggest song by far, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, just add on to that. When David Letterman did his final show on May 20th, 2015, they interrupted their tour. They flew out to his show. They played it live, and then it was cut to like a montage of like all the years, the 33 years that David Letterman was doing all that stuff, like his show and classic moments and stuff, and it was cut over Everlong. And David Letterman's on the record as saying it is his all-time favorite song.
Oh, that's awesome.
I have to say it's up there for me too. Like it's been a song that ever since I listened to it, there's never been a long stretch of time where I haven't gone to it. I covered it in almost every band I was in. It's a song one of the first songs I wanted to learn how to play.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's sort of always been there. It's always been like a classic, and it's kind of a good bridging song from like the early 90s, late 90s, when it kind of got into I don't know. It's a very 90s song, but it kind of lives outside of time at the same time.
Yeah, it's iconic. I feel like it was probably in Guitar Hero or something like that.
It was. I think it was in Rock Band.
Yeah, Rock Band, yeah. But it also, just like in terms of like being a young musician, there's a lot to learn from Everlong. Even though like in that acoustic video he's talking about like he doesn't know what chord it was or whatever, but you learn a lot. Like it's very gratifying when you first realize, oh, all I gotta do is like add the low note to get that second chord. Oh yeah, that's really good. Oh, it immediately sounds like that the song that you know. And for the drums, it's got that 16th note hi-hat double hands the whole time, so it's like a workout. And all the fills in the chorus are like all off the beat. I really like to hear what the original drummer on this album sounded like. Like holy crap. The drums in that song are iconic, of course.
Some of the tracks still have the original guy on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's only 2 tracks that do. It's Doll and
only the verse of Doll.
Yeah, and Up in Arms. Those are the only 2 tracks. Everything else, it's a pretty funny story about that. But
and then doesn't Taylor? Oh no, I guess that's some of the bonus tracks.
Yeah, so he wasn't. Taylor Hawkins wasn't involved in this album at all. He kind of got recruited because the other. Like, so basically quick, I guess the story behind that is the drummer, what's his name? William Goldsmith. He was the drummer. They recorded all of it or most of the album, and then they had a break around Christmas time, and Dave Grohl wasn't happy with, and same with the producer, Gil Norton. They weren't happy with how it sounded or anything like that. So Dave decided to record some additional songs, and then they moved almost secretly, or without telling Goldsmith, to LA to record. And he was just like, yeah, we're just doing overdubs. Like that's what they told Goldsmith, the drummer. And they're like, yeah, you don't have to worry. We're just doing overdubs. We don't need you right now. And then so he ended up re-recording all the drum parts, minus those 2 songs. And then that's what they went with. And then Dave Grohl was like, hey, I still want you to be part of my band, or this band. I want you to tour. And then that guy was pretty much like, fuck no, I'm not doing it. So that's how they were that's why they pursued Taylor Hawkins, who was then Alanis Morissette's live drummer.
Huh.
And they got him. So he was always doing live stuff. So I think it was like their 3rd or maybe even their 4th album where he was like actually drumming in the studio.
Yeah, I think it was the 3rd album where he kind of came in as a full-time member.
Yeah, Dave Grohl could have very well been. I think he was still doing some of the drumming parts. But yeah, Taylor Hawkins pretty much took over from that point on.
It's crazy. Okay, it's interesting how he wouldn't just tell him, like, you got almost the whole album recorded before you realized his drums were no good. Like maybe he just wasn't easy to talk to, and that's why you had to go to LA secretly.
In that one documentary, he kind of goes, Dave Grohl kind of goes through it. I think it was more so that he didn't like know how to tell him. Like he was still fairly young, I believe. So it's just more like, I don't know what to tell him, but I know I can go in the studio and just bang this out real quick.
Yeah, I did see a note somewhere. Apparently, like Gil Norton was pretty demanding. He wanted like the perfect take, so he always had him do takes over. So you have like Nate Mandel, who's like he had to like up his game. He pretty much had to like practice all his parts to be ready, good to go. And then it was like numerous takes. Like I think I saw somewhere like 96 takes that the drummer Goldsmith did for one song, and I guess there's one song where he put 13 hours of takes in for it, and so like that's just the high bar. And then plus on top of that you have Dave Grohl, who's like arguably one of the greatest drummers ever from one of the biggest bands ever, just kind of staring down at you and expecting a certain thing. Because when you hear interviews about how Dave Grohl talks, he just hears and knows what parts the music, when he writes a song, he knows like, okay, this is how the drums should sound, this is how the bass should sound, this is how like rhythm guitar and all that stuff should sound. So he's kind of got his mind made up when he goes into it. I'm sure he's probably a lot more diplomatic now, but when it's your second album and it's your name on the line, you probably have a bit of a different attitude.
Well, I do have to say though, as far as that goes, like for the bass lines, I do have to say they do have like a step up on this album as compared to the first one. It's more of a of a presence.
Yeah, there's some walking bass lines.
Yeah, I've always liked Nate's bass playing. He's always been pretty good. And Sunny Day Real Estate's good too.
Yeah, they're classic.
Yeah, if you got to do 96 takes for a song,
that's nuts.
Maybe you're not ready to be in the studio. Like, if I was the producer, I'd be like, fuck.
He was also from Sunny Day Real Estate.
Yeah, both those guys were, yeah.
It's not like it was his first time ever being in a band or recording. I wonder, just a different expectation, I guess.
Well, this is not easy stuff. Like, Everlong is not easy. Like, it took me a lot of time when I was a teenager practicing it to get the timing of the fills right, because they're off the beat. It wouldn't... And if that's not even... that's me going off of Dave Grohl's recording. If all you have is Dave Grohl telling you, oh, it has to sound like this, that's going to be a lot harder to put together. And I could see... Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting, like you said earlier, Ryan, Dave Grohl's not, like, trained. He learned how to play drums and he learned how to play guitar by ear. So he has no formal training, no lessons. So, like, to communicate that properly could be difficult for somebody who maybe lacks that kind of training.
Yeah, and it's not like he could have just recorded it quickly on his phone and then played it back for the guy. It's like different times, right? It wasn't so easy to do that stuff.
If you're going to get behind the kit and show him, you might as well just record it yourself.
I know at that point, it's like, maybe that's what he didn't want to do. He didn't want to take the throne, you know?
Yeah, you wanted to keep him around for the live shows, but didn't want to offend him by being like, don't play on the album.
So I want to ask, since you guys have both played this song live, is it like a fun song to play live, or is it hard, or is it just because it sounds great and everybody knows it?
Oh, it's a great song to play live.
Yeah.
Like that build-up is great. And plus, whenever you play it, everyone in the crowd knows the song.
Yeah.
And like even just like playing the song, like from going to like the verse to like that pre-chorusy interlude part, you just sort of play the riff like harder. So it's like kind of like
yeah.
It's great.
But I will say that the hardest thing about it is probably singing it. Like it's singing it and playing guitar. Yep. I don't think I've actually done that. I've performed the rhythm guitar, I've done the drums, but I've never sang it. I've tried singing it and playing it. I'm like, oh, this is kind of difficult. I don't think I've ever actually mastered that.
Like that whole "How long I've waited here for you ever long."
Yeah. And then you got to scream. I'm sure at some point. It's Foo Fighters after all.
Yeah. No, I think this is pretty much a perfect rock song. You don't even need to put like 90s in there. It's just a great rock song. Yeah. And I like the power. I think what you mentioned earlier, Anise, just like the power, I guess the pre-chorus or in between the first and the second verse where it's like, and she sang, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's just powerful. Like just listening to it right before I jumped on this, it's like, that's a muscular, like guitar riff, like everything's coming together so well.
Like the guitars are just like so rich and full too. And on that song, because on this album, as opposed to the first album, Dave Grohl's voice is a lot higher in a lot of the mixes as well, sitting on top of the songs.
Yeah.
But this is one of the songs. There's a couple of songs on the album where it kind of floats over top of the music, and Everlong is one of those songs. So it kind of gives it that nice vibe, along with the phasey guitar, like the thick guitars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess we also have to shout out like the music video is pretty classic. Like it's almost like a Evil Dead ripoff, directed by Michel Gondry, the great Michel Gondry.
And it's one of the only times where the song is extended for the music video.
I was gonna ask, isn't it like reverse? It's kind of looped and then they like jam out at the end.
And again, they played it twice. And I remember after that video came out and just being so prone to hearing it nonstop on Much Music, hearing it like on the album, it just felt too short. Like give me that chorus again.
Yeah, it's only 4:10, but yeah, probably on the music video version, it's probably like closer to another 30 seconds, or maybe even closer.
I think it's like 4:50. It's like almost 5 minutes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, just thinking about this song, I definitely have to teach this to my student bands once we get going again after this whole lockdown business, because yeah, there's a lot you can learn from it, and it is gonna, I think it's probably gonna stand the test of time. It seems like one of those songs, like if not the original version, somebody will cover it, you know?
Well, because even when you look at like their tops, like Foo Fighters' top 10 streams that they show on Spotify, number one is Everlong with 462 million. And then also eighth on the list is Everlong acoustic version with 137 million.
There you go.
Yeah. So like it's just a huge song, like both of those versions. And like we said, they just released another video on YouTube of him talking about the song and then playing it, and that probably has another who knows how many million views. Like people can not get enough of this song.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say all of that, but I would never consider this song overplayed. Like it would never even cross my mind that I think it needs to be stopped at some point.
No, usually when playing, you want to play it again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's like it still doesn't matter how many times you've heard it in the past. Like if it comes on in a bar, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, it's Everlong," or somebody's gonna sing along with some part of it. It's just, well, if you were born in the 80s or 90s.
Which I don't know. For me, it almost felt like when I was thinking about that question today, like the only real other contender I thought was Monkey Wrench, but Monkey Wrench, like obviously, I felt like it fell off a lot more like over time, because I remember like when the song came out, it popped. It was when that before Everlong was released, that was their biggest song.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, it seems like it kind of fallen off over time. I don't really hear it as much. But then when I looked, it's in their top 10, number 9, streamed on Spotify. And then My Hero is on there too, number 6.
I actually thought My Hero would be bigger. I mean, that also could have just been my Big Shiny Tunes 3 impression of things. But
also, My Hero has that big pump from football because it was used in the Varsity Blues movie. So ever since that, it's like used for football. Like I remember in high school before, like every Friday or whatever day our football team played, they'd play this My Hero in the morning. And even like when you're watching a football game on TV, they will play My Hero while going to and from break. Like it's become synonymous with football because of the movie Varsity Blues. And it's a great song.
I would say it's better than Monkey Wrench.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
I feel like My Hero is like one of those songs that kind of just works in every situation. Like you can play it as a tribute to heroes, like literal heroes, or you can play it ironically, like you see the clip in Wolf of Wall Street. It still works. It's like it's good. So yeah, I agree. It's a solid song. When I was listening to it with headphones, I don't think I've listened to it with headphones or recently. But when I had it turned up, you can kind of hear like, it seems like in the left speaker, left headphone, you can hear like a weird scratching that I never noticed, like with a guitar going on. It's just kind of like always running like underneath the song. So I thought that was kind of unique. I noticed something new.
It's always interesting to listen to songs. I know, especially of this era, like in the 90s, it seemed like they were doing so much stuff in the studio to make songs interesting. And I guess like Walkman, Discmans was kind of new technology too at the time. So people listening on headphones, certain songs, you get like little treats of things. Kind of like even on Paranoid Android where you get that robotic.
Oh yeah.
Paranoid, but I'm an Android.
It's just subtle. Like if you have it kind of turned up.
There's a lot. I find a lot of the 90s albums have that. Like hip hop, rock, like a lot of it had a lot of that going on.
A lot of that also has to do with just the ease of recording. It went like the more you use computers, think about it, the difference between cutting physical tapes and pasting them together as opposed to like just a couple clicks on a computer. Huge difference. So, you know, and when you start layering up a lot of guitar tracks, because, you know, you have infinite numbers, you can do as many as you want. You start hearing these like artifacts from interactions between them. So that scratching that you were hearing, like I don't know what it was. Maybe it was string noise, or maybe it was just the interaction of like different guitar tracks and some overtone getting pulled out. That can happen. But in older recordings, you didn't get that because you got 4 tracks.
I think partially because like I think it might just be a guitar like just kind of strumming the.
Could be.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
song's
it's very
got
big on the left
iconic
side.
guitar. It's got iconic drums. It's
Yeah.
got awesome vocals. Everybody sings
I
along.
know I love that melody too. That's another one where the melody, lyrics just sort of float with the music.
Yeah.
Hmm. So I guess I think we were all unanimous on biggest song, Everlong. We all agree with that.
Yeah.
And then, so I guess for most overplayed, what do you guys think for overplayed if you had to pick something from this album?
I'm gonna say at the time when this album came out, because it was sort of, it wasn't an official single from this album, but it came out the year after as part of the X-Files movie and had a music video and got crazy play on Much Music. I remember nonstop Walking After You, just nonstop on Much Music, to the point where like even listening to it now, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
It stands out from the rest of the album to me just because it got played to shit back in like 98, 99, because it was sort of the last dish single. So they sort of, it's overstayed its welcome.
Interesting. I don't remember hearing it too much, but I can certainly get the sense of some association with TV. I don't know why. Like I heard it in commercials or something, but
Well, it was part of the X-Files movie, so it might have been in like the
Must
X-Files
be it.
movie commercial or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that was quick piece of trivia about that one. That was one of the songs when they kind of split up, when Dave Grohl re-recorded all the songs. He wrote that song as like his feelings towards the other the drummer, that like as they were having the falling out, he wrote that song pretty much about that whole situation.
interesting.
For
I didn't know that.
for my overplayed, I had My Hero, just because I remember that song. That song was like everywhere. It still is everywhere. I'm not. I say, I know overplayed always has a bad connotation, but I say that as like that's probably the one I hear the most often from this album.
Yeah.
Like
I agree. Like, considering usually when you have like a bigger album, which I consider this a bigger album, you usually get a lot of like non-album tracks that get a lot of play. But it seems like maybe because Foo Fighters just have so much music at this point and so many great tracks from a bunch of different albums, but I don't feel like a lot of like any of the deeper tracks on these albums ever sort of get picked out and talked about, really, at least not in my circles. Maybe in Foo Fighters fan clubs, that they have songs they like, or people who go to their songs that they play live all the time.
mhm.
But I remember even seeing them live. I saw them on the One by One tour, and I don't remember them playing that many songs from this album or the first album beyond the singles, and maybe a couple other songs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what else would be like another single from the album? Like I would say maybe like February Stars could be, but it's also kind of a slow build, so it's like
I
that
really
may not
like.
do so well.
I really like My Poor Brain.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's a good song.
Mhm.
But I don't know. There could. I don't know. I feel like it's Foo Fighters. You can pick out any of these songs, and people would love it for some reason.
That's true. So I guess this can take us on to underrated. Or I'll ask favorite song after, but most underrated. I'll answer that real quick. You hinted at it earlier, Anise, but with the whole thing of Monkey Wrench, it seems like it was super big when it came out. It was the lead single, but it's kind of fallen off over the years. So that's why I kind of want to give it like as a single. It's probably like, I mean, all three of the songs are massive, but I want to give it kind of like an underrated shout out as a single.
That was my initial lean towards, but now I'm sort of like a hybrid answer of like any sort of deep track from this. Like, I find it weird that there's no beloved deep track from this album, like one that just gets played all the time or was on a live album that became a single or something. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of this album has been forgotten beyond the singles, which is a weird thing to say considering a lot of people rank it high on their lists of Foo Fighters albums. But yeah, I'd go with like a song like I was saying, My Poor Brain is really good. I really like the other one I mentioned. The name is escaping me now. The one with the applause in it. Yeah, See.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a different change up, and it's something that Foo Fighters kind of get accused of being sort of one note sometimes. But songs like this kind of what made these albums a little bit different at the time. They did have songs like that. It was kind of interesting to read that apparently the band didn't want the song on the album, and it was Dave Grohl that wanted it on the album.
Huh.
I think it's partially because it is so different. But yeah, no, I think the couple like any song really, like they're strange that no other song really has emerged from this. I guess the songs that are big from it are so big that's probably why.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just from people I've talked to who like this album, February Stars has come up. So
Yeah.
I think if you did poll the fans, that one would probably poll pretty high as from as far as non-single tracks go. But outside of that one, like I would say that the other songs, like you keep calling them deep tracks, are not deep enough to pull off that single level. I just think that they have some parts to them that are like kind of throwaway. Like you might have like a good chorus and a good bridge, but the verse might be, well, that's. But the singles are like bangers through the whole song.
Yeah, they're obviously on like a different level than the rest. But I don't know, like you said, February Stars is a great song. I remember that was one, like what Gordon was saying with the headphones thing. It always sounded really cool on headphones, and when I got a disc that year, it was one of the songs I learned to appreciate because of that, like the big ending and just the chill sort of vibe on it.
Yeah. Oh man, the greatest thing about that song, well, one of the greatest things is it builds up. Like at the end, it gets really loud, but at the same time, it's slowing down.
Yeah.
Like you can tell a drummer wrote this shit. It's so like it's rhythmic and that's like a juxtaposition you don't hear often. Most people are like loud, must go faster.
I'll go a different way for underrated as well. The song that was cut from the album, that's also the title track that was added on the 10-year anniversary release or whatever it was, and it's part of the Spotify. The Color and the Shape. They put it at the end. It's such a great track. I'm not sure if you listened to it this week, Ryan. But if you do,
I don't know if it was on the version. I gotta check actually now what my track listing was.
Yeah, if your last track is the song "The Color and the Shape," that'd probably be your favorite song off the album.
You know what? I was listening to it and something came up after like New Way Home. And I was like, what the hell? But it sounded louder, so I'm like, I think this is just like I shouldn't have been listening on YouTube.
That happened to me too, because I remember when The Color and the Shape came on, I'm like, I don't remember the song and I really like it. I'm like, maybe it just jumped to, when the CD album's done, it'll jump to other songs. I'm like, oh, because I didn't really remember it either. So I looked at my phone and it said Color and the Shape with the album cover. So I'm like, oh, I guess it was on it. And it wasn't until I was making my notes and I was putting down the song names where I was like, okay, it's not listed everywhere. So it was clearly a bonus track added later. But it's a really good song. It's a great song. If you only have the CD you purchased in 97, I'd say check it out. Check out the song The Color and the Shape.
Go buy the deluxe version.
It looks like it was on the Monkey Wrench single. It looks like.
Yeah, so it is. I looked into it because I'm in the same boat as you, Anise. When that song came on, I was like, wait, I don't remember. And this is like pretty thrashy too.
I guess he said they cut it out because it was too similar to Weenie Beanie from the self-titled.
Yeah, so I know it was included as a B-side to Monkey Wrench, and so that's kind of where you would find it before. But yeah, I definitely didn't have it on my 97 album version.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess for an underrated, a non-single underrated, I had "Hey Johnny Park." I like the placement in where the album is, and it's the third track. And apparently the name of it comes from growing up. Dave Grohl had like a friend. His name was Johnny Park, and they're friends from like age I think 5 to 12. And then he wrote this song or gave it that title just to try and rekindle the friendship with that friend. Just to be like, hey, let's hang out again or something like that. But yeah, I just like the whole thing.
It's a terrible
the whole
song.
thing. You don't like that song?
No.
I like
terrible song.
I like parts.
Sorry,
of
continue.
I like the first, but not the chorus of that song.
Really? I think the only good thing is the chorus, and it's not even that good, so it's not worth waiting for.
You know what it kind of reminds me of as well? Like just the setup of the whole song. Sorry to cut off Gordon, but
it's fine.
It kind of reminded me, like the whole setup of the song. It's like a less twangy version of Interstate Love Song.
I get that.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I also wrote, this is funny because when Monkey Wrench came, so sorry to jump around, but when Monkey Wrench, when I was like making my notes, I wrote for Monkey Wrench, the archetypical like good Foo Fighters song. A good Foo Fighters song has that energy, has a good hook, has a great bridge, and has a great Dave Grohl scream. And then for Hey Johnny Park, I wrote your archetypical mediocre Foo Fighters song. Has good parts. It's not like a terrible song, but it's not, I don't know, it's just sort of like that middle ground.
Okay. Before I rip on this song more, Gordon, tell us about how much you love it.
All right. No, I think I like the chorus. I agree. I the whole thing, like, hey, am I selling you out? I like the power of the music and stuff behind that. I mean, I think the chorus is probably, you're right. I agree with you, Ryan, there, that the chorus is probably like the best part of the song. For me, it was one of those songs I remember growing up when I would listen to, like, You Go Monkey Wrench, and then you're going through the song. You hear that song, it kind of takes its time to build up a little bit. So as a kid, I would probably be more likely to skip it. But as I got older, it grew on me. So that's why I threw it as an underrated. Okay, now rip it apart, Ryan.
Well, okay. I guess the main thing that I don't like about it is the opening guitar riff. That lead guitar riff just sounds so dinky to me. Like da 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 deener, da 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 deener. It sounds like something I would come up with and be like, no, I can't possibly write the rest of this song. I have to throw this out.
But okay, I was getting vibes like that all over this album where I'm like, okay, this sounds like stuff that we would write, but just a lot more simple, blah, blah, blah. Not that I'm trying to overhype the songs we wrote, because they probably sucked. But,
Was great.
But you also have to think, like at this time, the stuff that came out before this was a lot more simple in this genre. Like a lot of the early grunge stuff wasn't doing stuff, or was very reminiscent to classic rock, where it was sort of doing a different thing. Whereas this is more of like the modern post-grunge archetype, was built on bands like Foo Fighters, Bush, and later Silverchair releases. So at the time, it wasn't really derivative of anything. It became derivative of itself later on in the future. But I think at the time, I remember liking Hey Johnny Park a lot more in 1997 than I did going back this week. I'll put it that way.
Interesting. I think it's funny that in that interview I sent you guys with Nirvana, Kurt Cobain was kind of saying how the Sentence of Precious guitar riff was kind of like dinky, or he said it was like a bit boneheaded or something like that. I don't know. So maybe that's just a bit of Dave Grohl style. I don't know.
So is it? So do you like? So I mean, you went to school for music, Ryan. So is it noticeable that, like, when you hear like this album or anything by Dave Grohl, is it noticeable that he's not classically trained or formally trained in music?
That doesn't matter for rock music. It doesn't. You know how many rock musicians are not trained? Most.
Oh, majority of them, I guess.
Most of them don't know the chords. I mean, some of them. I think Dave Grohl, probably because he was a drummer first. I don't know if this is true. Maybe he was a guitar player first. I don't actually
know. No, he's a drummer first.
Was he? Okay, so
yeah.
You know, coming at it that way, you have such like a same deal with me. You have like a rhythmic backbone, so you can lean on that, and you don't have to necessarily get too deep into you just have to know a few chords, know your power chords, and then the rest of the songs you just write using cool rhythms. Yeah. There you go. So that's why a lot of this like Foo Fighters stuff is riff based, I think, probably because you can write cool rhythmic riffs and you don't have to know what's a cool seventh chord change that would move into this. That's why also I think a lot of their chord changes can kind of be like cliche. They'd be like, all right, I saw that chord coming.
When like I was like me playing guitar, I was never classically trained either, and bands like this were perfect for me to learn with. And especially when I first started playing guitar, I was writing songs and I was playing shows, and I didn't really even know what notes I was playing really. Like if I stopped and thought about it, I could write it all out. But when I was writing a song, I wasn't like, okay, E to A to F. Like I was just sort of sitting with the guitar in my lap and playing.
Yeah, totally. You use your ear first, and you just try to go for it.
I want to shout out a couple others underrated songs, I'm going to call them.
Okay, we'll see.
I think Doll is a good mood setter at the beginning of the album, like right before Monkey Wrench. And I also wanted to point out Enough Space. It's a good rock out album, and the end of the track, like the bridge into the outro, is the most Nirvana-y it gets on this album.
Yeah, and it is a little...
Last week. Yeah, it has like the driving bass line and the guitar. It's the most Nirvana-y of any of the songs on this album.
You got the Dave Grohl scream.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say it's a little bit more of the Foo Fighters self-titled album-ish in it too. It's a little bit more jangly, but it's also a great example of using some cool rhythm. It's like a 6/4 time feel, but it's kind of like a 4/4 over 6/4 thing. So that's like it's all based on riffs and rhythms, the whole thing, and Dave Grohl's screaming. So like in a sense, that's kind of when Foo Fighters is at its best as well.
Yeah. Okay, let's now that we've discussed these three bands, better rock. Who has ranked these rock screams? Dave Grohl, Kurt Cobain, Gino Marino.
Oh, you're not going to even include Maynard.
Well, Maynard's that's like a metal scream.
Okay, fair enough. We'll leave him out. Well, I'm not going to go first. Gordon, you go.
All right, I guess I'll go. I'll go Chino. I like Chino's scream a lot. He uses it. He's not afraid to use it. And whenever he uses it, it's not bad or out of place. So I'll give him the edge. I like Dave Grohl's scream a lot. It sounds great. And I guess that makes Kurt third. But like he's got like a weird voice where it's it's probably just because it was grunge, but it seemed like everything he was singing was like louder. It wasn't really like he didn't have. I know he's got like loud, quiet, loud, and all that stuff, but like it's not. It's always kind of raw, and that's where it's not like when he screams, it sounds great too. But like he's always had a rawness throughout it, so it's not much of a difference or a variation. So that's why I'll give those two guys the edge. I don't know. That's just off the top of my head.
Yeah, off the top, I would go Kurt Cobain first because I like the unhingedness of his voice. When he screams, you don't know what you're going to get, really. Like, it's so just sort of loose. And I would rank Chino second for almost that same reason, especially, like, I remember when Hexagram first came out, I was just so amazed by that freaking voice. And Dave Grohl, though I do love his scream, it can kind of be the same every time he does it, but it is a great scream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'll put him in the number 3 spot.
Okay.
Especially when we saw them live, I don't know how his voice stood up. Like he was just screaming on everything, and he was screaming between tracks, and that show was turned into a DVD, Anywhere But Home.
Was that Arrow Hall? That one?
Yeah. We went together.
Yeah. So I've seen them twice. I also saw them at Molson Amphitheater at one point, and it was the same deal. It's like screaming in between stuff, screaming things you used to sing, screaming just when you're talking to the audience, screaming this, screaming that. I was too much. For me, I was like, all right, like it's kind of becoming a one-trick pony. Like I know you can scream really great. It's cool, but come on, man.
That's one thing I noticed in their live show too. Like it was like I've been to metal shows, punk shows, but that Foo Fighters crowd was in fucking tense. Like I remember like halfway through the show I was pretty close and I had to get out of there. I'm like, I'm freaking getting killed. I was getting killed during like Pete Yorn as the opener. Like it was pretty crazy. And I remember seeing a guy coming out of the pit with like a nipple ring ripped out as his blood coming down.
Jesus Christ.
But and then like they extend every song to be like 10 minutes long. It was a very exhausting show, but I could see it being great if it was, I don't know, Arrow Hall wasn't probably the best venue for that. It was it took like a small show vibe and put it in a bigger venue and became almost too intense. And I'm a bigger guy. It was too intense for me. I was like, shit.
Yeah, Molson Amphitheater was not that great of a venue. Well, probably because my seats were right outside the there's like an overhang. You guys know what it looks like. There's like an overhang for a shelter, basically a rain shelter, up until a certain row, and I was like right past that row, and Canada geese come flying over, and I'm just like eating or whatever, and fuck geese shit right on me. I'm like all out of nowhere, and I'm like, the place is packed, and I'm in the middle of the row, so I gotta climb over everybody with geese shit, and like make it to a washroom. Like the place is packed, and wait in line at a washroom with geese shit on me. So yeah, I've never been to a Foo Fighters show since.
So was that Dave Grohl's fault that the bird shit on you?
Yeah, for booking Molson Amphitheater. Fuck that place.
We should have just got better seats and you wouldn't have got shit on.
I also blame the birds.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, sorry, what was your ranking, Ryan? You said Dave Grohl third.
No, yeah, Dave Grohl I would put third. I would agree. It's just it gets a bit much. It's really clean, but it gets a bit much. Although
What kind of, does he have the best produced Scream?
It's
out of those three?
I don't know. I think it's just like practice. I don't know how he does it because
I think he throws it out pretty loosely, but when it hits, it can be really good. Like when you get like a monkey wrench or what's that? Like what's that
like
one?
All My Life or Pretender?
Yeah, All My Life or Pretender, something like that, where it hits really good. But then he kind of just, especially live, he just kind of throws it left and right pretty loose.
Yeah. Speaking of All My Life, you remember when we used to cover that with Fans of Crime? Yeah, that scream at the end of it, I literally would pass out. Like I would start seeing stars before the end of that note, and I would just be like, muscle memory, automatic, take me to the next downbeat until we got to the chorus, and then I could come back, like my stars would fade. I just about passed out every time. I don't know how he does it a whole show, like constantly, but maybe that was a particularly long. What's that?
That was a fun song to play too.
Yeah, it took us a while to get that intro going, but
I forgot how many. Like I didn't realize how many Foo Fighters songs we covered. That's 3: Everlong, My Hero, All My Life.
Yeah, you learn a lot. You learn a lot covering Foo Fighters because it's rhythmically interesting, so it pushes you that way.
It kind of fit with the stuff we were doing too, I guess.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, so I would say Chino's number 1. He's just my favorite Scream. It's just like a distortion pedal. I don't know. It's just got this tonality to it that is like almost like a sinisterness to it that the other guys don't have. Kurt Cobain would be number 2 because I also like how it breaks. Like On In Utero, there's takes of him like screaming and stuff. His voice is like cracking and stuff. Like, was that the best take? So I guess so. That's what they want to go with.
It's also crazy to look, even like going back to like Bleach and Nevermind. You look at his age, and you're like, that voice is coming out of like a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, however old he was. It's like, Jesus Christ, like it's a pretty crazy voice.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, yeah. So he's got a good scream. Dave Grohl's got a good scream. Just I don't know where. Maybe he's not screaming as much anymore. He's a bit older since the last time I saw him. So
they still have some tracks where you can give it, but yeah.
I mean, live though, we should check him out. I mean, when that's the thing again.
Yeah. I guess a random piece of trivia is he's always chewing gum live or chewing gum in general, just to kind of keep his throat moist. Specifically for screaming. I
remember he used to always burp, like while singing. He would like burp in between songs and between lyrics and stuff.
Yeah.
He'd like sing from his stomach, so he'd blow out a lot of air. I guess push up a lot of air.
Yeah. Maybe he was just in between.
Sounds like a psychological thing. Like he's afraid of getting a burp in the middle of a song, so he's like, I gotta get it out in between.
I don't know.
So I guess this can take us to what's your favorite song? It might be the same as the biggest song. I don't know. What do you guys? I can answer first. Whatever you guys want.
Go for it.
So yeah, I Everlong is my first or my favorite. It's just such a powerful song. I guess we don't have to talk about it. We've already done enough. So that's the one I had.
Yeah. Dave, I had pretty much songs we've talked about, like Everlong, My Hero, My Poor Brain, Color and the Shape, even though it's not really on the album. So if I had to, because I know we talked about Everlong and My Hero were kind of the two ones we all sort of fawned over. So I throw in like My Poor Brain and Color and the Shape are also 2 great tracks that stand out to me.
Yeah, I agree with My Poor Brain. That's an awesome song. But February Stars, that's up there with Everlong for me. So like, I want to say February Stars just because Everlong's the popular one. But obviously Everlong's probably the best song, so can't get around that.
Yeah, reviewing or listening to this album this week, because I can't remember. It's been a few years since I've listened to it from beginning to end. It seems it's one of those albums where when I remembered or I think back on it, I think there's more quiet moments or slower songs or just I guess just more quiet moments on this. But in reality, every song, maybe if it starts out quiet, it picks up and it shoots off. Like there's no real, I guess like a ballad or just like a slow song or anything like that. Like it's Everlong.
I'd say this too.
I think there's the big reason to I had the same notion for Foo Fighters overall. Like I remember Foo Fighters being like a lot more softer or quieter or whatever, just kind of thinking of them in my head. And I think it's partially because by the time like this album came out and then the album after this, you know, like Learn to Fly and stuff, new metal was the mainstream rock music. So everything was a lot heavier and a lot louder. So in juxtaposition, it was a lot quieter. And even bands that were sort of like the continuation of this style of music, like a Finger 11, was, even those bands were like, they were sort of trying to fit in that mold between the 90s rock and the new metal. So they sort of had that edge as well. So yeah, at the time, I felt like it sounded a lot quieter, but listening now, it's like pretty hard rock. Like it doesn't get, like not much music nowadays is heavier than this album is, or even the albums after this.
Yeah. That being said, I would say there's a few dips on the album,
well, which is fine,
which are good. Like See You is a great, and I actually really like Walking After You. I kind of wish they ended the album there. I kind of wish they put New Way Home in place of Hey Johnny Park, but whatever, I'm not in charge. And the beginning of what is it? Up in Arms. Like that's pretty chill. I kind of wish they didn't like go to punk rock town after that.
Up in Arms, like I love the effect on the vocals. The first half is a lot better than the second half. When it picks up, it kind of almost sounds like a generic, almost pop punk.
Yeah,
almost like Simple Plan or Sum 41 vibes. Which
exactly what I was thinking. I was like,
why did they do this?
How was this a good decision?
Yeah.
So I mean,
I understand the arena rock appeal of that. They're like, okay, let's kick it up, and that's probably all it was.
Well, I don't know if this factors into it, but that's one of the songs that William Goldsmith's drumming survived. Does that matter, or do you think that plays into that?
Well, the drumming in the second half is, I can see why Dave Grohl would be like, yeah, I don't want to do that over. It's fine. It's like,
so I guess Ryan kind of hinted at it earlier. Going into this, I was like thinking of like, what song do I skip? If there's a song I skip, usually if I like when I was younger, I'd skip through it because I'm like, oh, I want to get the singles or I want to get to like the hard hitting songs. But listening to it when I'm older, I was debating. I'm like, should it end on Walking After You? It seems like the way that song ends, it would be like the perfect. You hear the footsteps out of the studio and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden it comes in with like a nearly 6-minute New Way Home. But that song's really good too. I like the way it builds. So I think it's probably just the placement. It maybe was take out like one of the shorter songs and move this into the middle of the album somewhere. I don't know. What do you guys?
I agree with that.
How about you, Denise?
Say that again. If they would have done what?
Oh, taking the New Way Home.
Like track 13 and moved it earlier up in the album.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say the same thing. No Way Home could have gone even just after Everlong and before Walking After You, and it would work.
Yeah.
But then in the bonus, you get the color and the shape at the end, which is a pretty aggressive song, which almost could have worked. Like I know it ended up getting cut, but you could have almost had it as I know we talked about this last few weeks, but as a secret song.
Actually, yeah, that's what I thought it was at first. I'm like, there's not enough gap between this and the last song.
It functions pretty good as like a secret song because it's more of like a hardcore, thrashier, more noisy song. So
yeah,
it would kind of fit. Just have end on Walking After You, and then have like a 10-minute space or some shit, and then come in with some noise.
Yeah, that would have been a good idea. So yeah, I didn't really have a song. Like that was probably the song. I'm like, could have even ended on Everlong, but you can't end it on Everlong. You do need something after that, just to kind of. That's not the final piece of the album.
Yeah.
And Walking After You is great. It's a good.
Mm-hmm.
I also like when bands throw like, especially when a big single appears at like the second half of an album. I don't know why, but I love that because usually it's usually like first or second track. When it's on the second half of an album, it almost tells you that either the band or the studio or someone didn't probably think it was going to be a huge single. That's why it is later on the album.
I don't know how they could have missed that one, but
I know, like it seems so undeniable now, but life before Everlong, could you imagine Everlong going big? I don't know.
Maybe they knew it, and the whole album is just because I mean, at least now it feels like a build up to Everlong in a sense. Because when it finally comes, you're like, oh yeah.
But even like just thinking of now, like at the time, like when Everlong came out as a single, like I know we're only 12, 13 years old, but when Everlong came out as a single and we were listening to it, even 5 years after it came out, did you ever imagine that it would become such this iconic rock song? Like almost.
No, I thought Monkey Wrench was that song.
Yeah, it almost felt like it when the singles dropped. A Monkey Wrench would have been the song, or something off the first album, or even Learn to Fly. I don't know. It just seemed like it could have been anything.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, something about Everlong.
Yeah, and resonated with everyone. We chose to cover it like 5 years after it came out, so that says something.
I mean, maybe that's part of the driving force. I don't think a huge part of it, but just it's fun to play on guitar, so
yeah,
it's an easy one to recommend as a cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess just a little bit as like a side note. I mean, this album can almost be considered like a concept album because the whole when Dave Grohl was writing this album, he was going through his divorce with his wife and just battling everything like the infighting within the band and dealing with that. So that's the way Dave Grohl describes this album is like it's like almost like a therapy session where at the beginning of the album it's like very raw, like middle of or like the harshest parts of the divorce, and then he's like getting through it and then he finds somebody else. So when it's like getting to Everlong and towards the end, that's where he's kind of like he finds somebody new. And the whole thing of like the lyrics in Everlong kind of play into that where it's like okay, yeah, things are good right now. I know they're going to be bad, but like we're going to keep working and we're going to go through it anyway. We're going to go like it's going to go the way it goes. So it's kind of like originally he instead of the artwork that it has, he wanted to do just like a therapy chair on the cover of it. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
But like when I was listening through again today, I kind of followed along with the lyrics and stuff. Yeah, some songs are about stuff, seem like they're about, relationships and stuff, but then other songs seem like they're about nothing. So I wouldn't go as far as to say the album is a concept album.
Right, yeah.
Like
not that far, but
we place it beside other concept albums. It's like it's pretty thin to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because even some songs like just reading, because I even remember like again like quoting an Intimate Interactive, he'd be like talking like this song's about holding on and not letting go. It's like okay, pretty generic, but whatever. Can I rock out to it?
Yeah. You can twist it, right? You can twist it.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason you make your lyrics ambiguous, so people can twist into whatever story they want.
I thought every song was about Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, that's what I thought. At least February Stars.
So for the album's artwork, I did have this album, but I couldn't find it. It's beat to crap somewhere. But I don't remember any crazy liner notes, but I did read that The Shape and the Color, that title comes from one of their touring managers would just go to, like, whenever they stopped in the city, he'd just go to thrift stores and just buy like random crap. So one day he bought a bowling pin and it had red and white stripes on it. And he remarked, he's like, I like the color and the shape of it. So they thought it was funny. And rather than come up with a title that played into the themes and the meaning of the album, they just decided to go with a random title like that. And then one other thing, I don't know if you pointed this out earlier, Nice, but the coloring, the word color on it is a U, and it's a tribute to the producer Glenn Norton, who is British. So it's not like a Canadian reference, but when I was searching the album today, I'm like, wait, is Wikipedia just doing this because I'm Canadian? But it's
no, I remember that being. I didn't remember the reason why, but I remember just being like, oh, nice, they spelt it the like Canadian British way. It was kind of neat.
Yeah, we like our U's up here in case nobody knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, if you don't get our sense of humor, then that's on you. So did you guys have any other songs or anything else, song-specific questions or things that you wanted to mention that we may have left out?
I think we touched on almost every song.
Yeah, I can't see anything here we haven't talked about.
Wind Up, good rock out song, has kind of a sexy guitar riff on that one.
Yeah. That was good. That was the one where I thought like the verse was a bit of a throwaway. There wasn't much going on there, but that's like typical. Yeah,
like that's something Foo Fighters I think fall into like on every album. Just again, it's sort of like what we're talking about with Pearl Jam, where their style of music, you can't, if you're going to leave that box, it kind of opens it up and they kind of lose what makes Foo Fighters so mainstream and popular. Because even on like later albums where they tried something different, fans were split on. Even when I listen to it as someone who has a more wider range of music, I'm like, this isn't that different.
Yeah.
Which and then you kind of read that was sort of like the breakup of fans. It's like some fans were saying this is too different. Some fans were saying it sounds derivative. And to me as an outsider, I'm like, it sounds good. I don't know. Like,
Was it the double disc where you think people started to split on them, or?
I think so. Getting to like more of, I don't know for what Gordon wants to jump to next.
No,
like,
no, yeah. How often is this in your rotation? We can talk about the other stuff.
Okay, so how often is in my rotation? For me, Foo Fighters, I have like a shit ton of songs from like every album on like I have like a giant playlist that I keep constantly bringing up. But I have a bunch of songs from every album on it, and I was even surprised like when I was going through to listen to albums and I noticed that songs downloaded pretty much from every album. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot that I have all these songs on a playlist and I hear them regularly. And then even listening to the albums, I was like, oh shit, like I remember like a lot of these songs, so I probably I tried to stay up with every album. As every album came out, I would listen to it and keep it in my rotation. I've been listening to them a lot lately because their new album came out. So I've been listening to songs from that, which led me to listen to older songs, plus this week of covering them. So I've been listening to a lot of Foo Fighters this last like 6 months. But yeah, they're in my playlist fairly regularly. I have like a love-hate relationship with them, which we'll get into more when I talk in my rank and their legacy and everything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's kind of, yeah, that's like they're not in my, okay, so usually it's their first album that I'll go to like every couple of years. I'll remember like, oh yeah, this song, and I'll put on, I don't know, any one of the first 4 tracks are just amazing, one after another. And there's lots more great on that album, but even when I put on this for the podcast, I started listening to it and I was like, yeah, and I put on the other Foo Fighters album. I listened to that first, but I don't know. It's so that's really where I go to. So, what in terms of the rest of their discography, it's like songs here and there, like some singles off of a couple favorites off of an album here or there, like a couple of the acoustic versions or something like that. But yeah, I don't like regularly listen to Foo Fighters because, I mean, they're not put like usually over the last few years when they put out something new. I've been like, that could have been really good, but then you just went to that thing that you always do. So in that sense, I'm not that inspired by it. So I will go to it for nostalgic reasons.
Have you gone back though and listened to like their newer albums, or are you just judging them off the singles? Because I'd almost say that's two different animals.
Really?
Like, yeah, that's like it. Like that's something I've noticed. Like especially like in the later years have been a little different, but especially in those middle years, like the juxtaposition from like singles to album tracks was almost like two different albums. Almost like the singles were almost made for the radio, whereas the album was made as like a rock album.
Yeah, no, I think I stopped actually listening through the whole albums after In Your Honor. I think In Your Honor's
okay.
Last. Was that the double? Is that the double disc one?
Yeah, the double disc. That's the double disc. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know what it was after that, but yeah, I would hear the singles and be like, I don't really want to check that. I'm not too inspired by it. So I think it's just so. But if you're saying they shouldn't have put those songs forward then.
But here I'll put it this way though. I think Foo Fighters, something like this is kind of relate, like it's a good thing to bring up for them. Do you need to be inspired by the Foo Fighters? They just seem like a party rock band that you put on like when you have friends over or when you're just hanging out or chilling or rocking out. They don't seem like a band that's trying to make any sort of, I know their one album they kind of got more political in their lyrics or whatever, but overall they're just pretty, like they're a pretty safe band. Like you can jump to any album and there'll be songs that are good. You'll have some slow tracks, some hard tracks, some medium tempo stuff. Like their albums are each one is pretty well formed around. You can say they're mediocre, but mediocre isn't really a bad thing. It's just, yeah, like you're saying, they're not really inspiring and reinventing the wheel with their releases. Like they didn't take the Radiohead route where every album is like a whole different monster, but to providing rock music in an era where it's very scarce, especially in the mainstream. So yeah, I give them kudos for that. And they kind of stuck to their guns in a way. I feel like
just to add on to that, like whenever you see Dave Grohl in interviews, he's almost quick to say like, if you come to a Foo Fighters show, you want to see some crashing drums, you want to hear some poppy hard rock tunes, and you want to hear a bunch of guys playing guitar and doing that. That's what we do, and that's my lane. Like there's always rumors that they're breaking up and whatnot. And a few years ago, they had a video where they're like, Dave Grohl, as a joke, was like, I'm just going to play like synthesizer. He's talking with Butch Vig. They're in the studio. He's like, you just got to play like keyboards and synthesizers. And then the other guys are trying to find a replacement for Dave Grohl. And they finally settle on Nick Lachey from 98 Degrees. But like, they're always kind of joking and poking fun at like things that aren't traditional rock band kind of setups or sounds.
And I think also Dave Grohl realizes what the Foo Fighters is, because it's like he does do other stuff, especially Dave Grohl himself. Like he's done work with like Queens of the Stone Age. He's worked with Nine Inch Nails. He had them Crooked Vultures project. He did Probot. He did that documentary show and where they made the soundtrack. He worked with a bunch of different musicians. So it's not like if you're into Dave Grohl and you take even just Foo Fighters out of it, because Foo Fighters is very much Dave Grohl's baby, but like Dave Grohl does get other things out of him. But he knows what Foo Fighters is, and when he comes back to Foo Fighters, he knows we have to make a rock album. And they were even saying it for one of their albums. I think it was Concrete and Gold, where it's like sometimes we have to just go in there to make a rock album. And I feel like around the time where you're saying you fell off, that's kind of around the time where I sort of fell off too. And I think it's because they were trying too hard to almost make songs for the radio. Like it seemed like a lot of their stuff was radio friendly, whereas I feel like after Wasting Light, they were like, okay, let's be a rock band. And ever since then, they've kind of, yes, you can say a lot of it, the albums don't vary too much in and of themselves, but they're all like pretty good rock albums. Like they're not reinventing the wheel, or they might not be inspiring to some people like us. But for younger people where there is no rock music, there's still Foo Fighters that's still pumping out albums that are selling well and debuting in the top 5.
It also seems like they're a pretty cohesive band. So keeping, knowing what you guys are, like what the identity is, and you go there. You don't have to be worried about the singer being like, okay, we're gonna do everything with synthesizers this album. Like if you just like everybody gets it, and you just trust each other, that's gonna help keep the band together. It's gonna help the whole project. So yeah, I could see that being part of the motivating one motivating factor. But like, I just wanted to point out that Dave Grohl is also like a really good songwriter. He did write Everlong. So even though there may not be any of these like genre spicy mixing things up or anything like that throughout Foo Fighters album, you might get a little bit here or there, but you're gonna find these gems of really well written songs. So worth hunting for.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, like the album Concrete and Gold, I feel like they tried a lot of different stuff, and that album does have a very different vibe. Even the production sounds different. I like that album a lot, and it seems like fans were split on it. So that's sort of like the issue with being a band of their size, is that if you do take that experiment, you can get the Radiohead route where maybe you lost some fans, but you gained a lot of new fans. But Foo Fighters at this point, they're just sort of pumping out music for their fans, trying to put rock music out there and keep it on the map. So yeah, I don't think he's too concerned with like reinventing the wheel at this point.
No. I mean, people, even when Learn to Fly came out, I remember people like, oh, they're super poppy now. They're just like a pop band. It's like, what? It's like they can't even deviate that much. Can't have a clean guitar.
I would say I was one of those people when that song came out. I wasn't very big on it, but the album was good. There was a lot of good songs on it, and that song I do feel is better live. I don't know, maybe it's just the production on it, or maybe it's just
it got overplayed.
They made that goofy video, and it was getting overplayed. And I'm just sort of like, I'm sick of this at this point. And I was older, so my musical tastes were changing or was broadening.
First 2 tracks on that album, though, like so good. Like it starts with Stack Factors, and then Breakout. It's just like 2 rockin', great songs.
It's a good album. There's a lot of good tracks on there.
I think the other thing is too that's worth considering is like, since Dave Grohl's such a presence, like he's done he's made music on his own his entire life. Like he could just go the Beck route and make albums on his own. He's done it before, but he prefers to be in a band and have that camaraderie. So I think he often takes his talents elsewhere to South Beach. But no, like you mentioned, like on the other bands, like that he's done, like Queens of the Stone Age, which we're going to talk about next week. He did the drumming on Tenacious D's first album. He's done drumming for Nine Inch Nails. The list is on and on. So I think he uses, like, he's not afraid to use his energy. If he's like, I want to get back into like more of a hardcore of a punk kind of thing, I'm going to go work with like Nine Inch Nails. I'm going to go work with Queens of the Stone Age.
And you can also tell that he's a really nice guy, and he doesn't have this stuck-up ego, which is why he can let the band, his baby, be about the people there and not about himself, right? He was the drummer in Nirvana, and he was fine with that. He was like, yeah, I can sit at the back. He knows how to be at the back. So it makes for that level of humility makes for a really great frontman. And I think that's why he's known as like probably one of the best rock and roll frontmans, that are still around.
Yeah. You see that earlier, I think, I guess it was last year, where that little girl on the drums covered, I forget which Foo Fighter, or a Nirvana song, or a Queen, I forget what song, but a song that Dave Grohl plays drums on, and then he kind of and then he responded to it. Sorry?
He had the drum battle with Nandy.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was like the little girl. They were going back and forth. I think she's, but I do remember that. He did. Dave Grohl, we can spend a few minutes to talk about Dave Grohl. He does seem to have he seems very honest, and he's always got a great sense of humor, which for a guy who's been through all the stuff he's been through, it seems like he wouldn't have that, but he's not afraid to be engaged with his fans. That's a good example. Another example being I think in 2006, some miners were trapped in a mine that collapsed in Australia, and they're coming up with plans to rescue the miners, and they're like, hey, what can we pass you just so because it's going to take hours or days for us to rescue you. And they said, in your honor, because I guess that was the big album out at the time. And then so he wrote a personal note, and he's like, when you guys get out of here, let me know any show you guys want to go to. He's like, we'll have a couple beers, and he's like, and he ended up writing a song for those guys. So he's always got he's very engaged with his audience.
Yeah, he's definitely the people's rock star.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why he works with so many other musicians, because they just kind of love to work with him. He's always yeah, let's jam right now, and he just shows up at wherever Prince is. He had a story about Prince where Prince is like, yeah, we should jam sometime, and then Dave Grohl just showed up, and they ended up jamming in an empty Coliseum, just the two of them. The stories he's got are probably endless.
Have you seen that video? Have you seen that video from that Sound City documentary thing that he did? I guess it's on the soundtrack too, but it's Dave Grohl on drums, Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age playing bass, and Trent Reznor playing piano. And it's the song is called The Mantra. It's just this cool, they're just sort of jamming out, but it's really cool. And it's you can see three of my personal rock heroes just in a room just jamming out. It's really cool to watch. It's cool to have moments like that. And I remember even just going to see them Crooked Vultures when they did their thing, and they didn't have an album out. All they had released was a snippet of one song. All we knew that it was Josh Homme on guitar and vocals, John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin on bass, and Dave Grohl on the drums. And I'm like, okay, I'm buying tickets. And me and my friend Emma, we drove down to Toronto, knew nothing about what the music was going to be. And it was an amazing show. When it got to the part of the song where they played the snippet, the crowd went wild. It was the only part we knew. And I was like, this is a bucket list thing for me. Is I can cross it off the list. I've seen Dave Grohl play drums live. It's literally I saw he went behind the kit for a minute or two.
Yeah.
At the Foo Fighters show, but no, I can cross it off. I watched a full show with him playing the drums, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
So what's it seeing that? Does he bring a different energy, or is it because it's Dave Grohl that your focus is on the drummer as opposed to other bands where it's on everything, or this?
It was hard to know what to focus on, because I'm such a big fan of all three of those guys on stage, and it's just I don't know what to look at. You're just I've seen Queens of the Stone Age live 100 times, so Josh Homme I've seen, but even John Paul Jones, I'm never probably gonna have an opportunity to see this person live. Led Zeppelin isn't reuniting anytime soon, and I doubt he's gonna work on any other projects that I'm gonna care about. So that was very once in a lifetime experience. I know there's been talks of them doing another album if they toured, if whatever is even allowed, that's a whole nother conversation. But if they come again, I'm going 100%. Let's just put it that way.
So that's really interesting. Nobody knew the songs, but everybody was probably just glued to the people, so it didn't
Yeah.
matter. That's yeah. Man, I love seeing bands jam like because we've all like, well, sorry Gordon, not you, but we've jammed it before and we know what it's like. You're just in a room making shit up. I want to see them do that. Like sometimes I could have some pretty good moments. Imagine them in a room, those three guys just jamming out.
That'd be kind of like a cool thing to like happen. Like, I know it's kind of a cool thing now that we get with, a bunch of comedians have podcasts now. So it's cool to hear all these, like, you get Bill Burr and Tom Segura sitting and having a conversation, or you get, you just get, it's kind of these cool interactions with people. It'd be cool to kind of get a similar type thing with like bands. Imagine just getting, a bunch of musicians in a room just to jam. Like, don't make me an album. You don't have to write songs together. Just put out a cool jam, and then let the fans pick out parts they like, pick out parts they don't like, and it kind of probably be like a cool experiment. If anyone ever try it, it seems like it would be a kind of cool thing to do. But.
Yeah, just do it live. Dave Grohl, if you're listening, set this up. You can get all your contacts. You can set up some jams.
Well, I guess that's the whole idea of that sound studio, whatever document.
There's also Sonic
Highways. Oh, we already did this? Oh, okay.
And
good work, Dave.
But like more of an ongoing thing, like that was made for TV. You know what I mean? Like that has like a motive behind it. It'd be cool. Not that this wouldn't, but it'd just be cool. More of a loose, not as planned and produced thing. Just people, just more of a raw look at it.
So like Dave Grohl should have a podcast. Maybe they jam at the end of it or something.
That'd be really awesome.
That'd be sweet. That'd be sweet.
Yeah, I feel like Jack White released a documentary a few years ago. The name's slipping my mind, but I think he had some similar feel where he was like in a studio and he would just invite people like legendary down to like indie people, and they would just jam and discuss like, I think he has a session with like Edge from U2, and they talk about like some U2 songs and why he does it a certain way or uses.
You're not talking about that documentary that's Jimmy Page, the Edge, and Jack White, and they talk.
Is that that might be the one then?
Yeah, that's a documentary. It's not a Jack White show. It's called It Might Get Loud.
Right.
Yeah, that's a pretty good doc.
Yeah, that's got to be pretty old. I don't remember, like mid 2000s or.
Yeah, probably like 10, 15 years ago now.
And then I also did read that Dave Grohl doesn't do drugs. Like he used to do smoke weed and LSD back in up until his 20s. Then he kind of just gave up on that. He's never done like hard drugs like coke or heroin. He's seen too many people die to do that. But apparently he's like a fiend for coffee. He had to go to the hospital in 2009 because he had chest pains from drinking too much caffeine. But I guess when you see him, like, and even in interviews, he'll say it, that when he was younger, he just like was crazy. Like he's comatose now, and he was like had crazy energy, maybe ADD or something when he was a kid.
Well, I know like he's super against like the whole drug thing, because I think there was a point where Taylor had like a drug issue and OD'd and stuff, and he kind of like kicked him out of the band or something briefly for his own sake. I don't know if they've released anything during that time, but I remember him being like, he's like, I don't want to watch like another band member fucking die of like drugs, so clean yourself up. I believe ever since then he's been clean as well.
Yeah, and I think it served him well. Like, I mean, he's got like his full brain, so he's not. As they get older, you can see like they almost bring former members back, like Pat Smear. Like I don't think he was into drugs. I think he left the band originally because of exhaustion and stuff like that. But it's funny how he just kind of, the band keeps growing. Like Foo Fighters was like almost like was one guy, and then it became like almost like a 3-piece, and then it was 4, and then now it's like up to 6 people, I believe. So it keeps growing.
Well, yeah, well, because Pat Smear, when he wanted to come back, they didn't want to kick out the other guy, and I'm sure they back.
Well, there's like 10 guitar tracks layered up anyways.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I always thought, I've said it to kind of privately in conversations, but I've always thought like just the stories and stuff that Dave Grohl would have. Like if I could die and just come back as like anybody currently living, like Dave Grohl would probably be it. Like he strikes me as the kind of guys like Forrest Gump, but like he doesn't have the low IQ or the limited IQ.
There's that documentary that debuts today where it's like called On the Road or whatever, where Dave Grohl's driving around, I think just talking to musicians and stuff, just getting different stories. So that would be cool. And he released a song with his daughter. I believe it's a cover that sounds really cool as well, called Nausea.
Yeah, he sent that to me. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, I don't know, his energy is pretty contagious. So I would almost put him in like the same vein as like Tom Hanks or Snoop Dogg. Like he's almost like an American treasure in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, he's just like one of those celebrities you can picture just sort of anywhere. Like just he'll play at the White House. He'll play on the Tonight Show. He'll play on SNL. He'll be on like every podcast. He'll do everything, you know?
Yeah. Nobody's going to cancel Dave Grohl. I don't think so.
Hopefully not. That would suck. That'd be really depressing.
Yeah, I think the only two people that I know of that have publicly spoken negative about him was like William Goldsmith, who is the drummer from this album, and Courtney Love. But like at Nirvana's induction into the Hall of Fame, they hugged, and apparently they've buried the hatchet. So yeah, that's the power of Dave Grohl.
Yeah. I can't see why no one would hate Dave Grohl.
Yeah, it's gotta be weird. So I guess this can take us to the album ranking. Where do you rank this album in the band's discography? Who wants to go first, or do you want me to go?
Well, I'll go first. I think I've only got half the discography under my belt. So
all right, go for
it. So like you already know, I've also revealed most of this throughout the podcast, but their self-titled I put as number 1. That's my go-to. I love the grunge bit that was left over on that album. And I would put The Color and the Shape is actually, I would say, okay, it was tough for me to decide between that or There's Nothing Left to Lose for number 2. But I in the end, I think Color and the Shape won out. It just has Everlong on it. So, and My Hero. It has like the singles are good from the other one too. But yeah, and then I put There's Nothing Left to Lose, and then One by One, and then In Your Honor. So
release order of what you've heard.
So you, as you can see, why I would stop listening, because it's like, all right, maybe I'm done.
So I'll do mine next, and I'll give a little insight. I'm going to go from 10 to 1. I'll go reverse order. So number 10, I have In Your Honor. So that's like my least favorite. I feel like the first album starts kind of good, and then it kind of goes generic. And the second album, like that acoustic or slow album or whatever, I never got into it. Like for me, when it comes to that style of music, I have like certain artists I go to, especially when at the time this came out, I was, big into a lot of the singer-songwriters. So it seemed sort of lame to me. And even listening this week, I stopped it halfway through. I'm like, I can't get into this. So it's mainly because that second album being so weak that it's at the bottom. And then I have Echoes, Silence, Patience, and Grace at 9, and There's Nothing Left to Lose at 8. Those two, I feel like, because at that time, I stopped sort of paying attention to them because I wasn't a big fan of those albums because I didn't like the direction they were going. But they switched courses, obviously, after that. Sonic Highways, I didn't really listen to a lot up until this week. Like when it came out, I listened to it, and there was a couple of tracks that I had on my playlist. But this week, I kind of got into it, and it was a good album. The Medicine at Midnight, the new one that came out this year, I really like, and it's short, kind of breezy to get through. I have that at 6. Number 5, I have One by One. And I think the only reason that's ahead of Medicine at Midnight and Sonic Highways is nostalgia purposes, because there's some singles that I really love on that album. Then I have Wasting Light, which when that album came out I was like, they're back. I was in love with that album. The song White Limo is amazing. Great album. And then I have Concrete and Gold at 3, which is their last album, which I thought was a good change. Yes, I thought it was a good change of sound. Like the production is different. The songs do a lot of different things. I thought it was like, I know a lot of fans, I guess, are split on it, but I really enjoyed it, especially this week when I was listening through. It was a good change of pace.
I think I'll probably like that one. Anyway, continue. Yeah.
And then number 2, I have The Color and the Shape, which, again, I think it's a good album, but at this point, I don't know if it would be ranked this high if I didn't have so much nostalgia connected to it. But it does have songs like My Hero, Everlong, and Monkey Wrench, which are some of my favorite songs by them. And then number 1, I have the self-titled album, which I cannot even explain, like that album, like how big it was for me growing up. Like when it was coming out, they were like my favorite band at the time. It was just, there's so many songs on that album I love. I found it interesting when I looked at the list after. I'm like, it's funny how the top 2 albums on my rank and on Ryan's rank, and I don't know about Gordon's rank yet, but I think they might be the top two there. I'm not sure. I could be wrong.
Yeah, oddly though, well,
I think that the top two are the two that have Dave Grohl playing drums on it.
of course.
Why not, Gordon? Give us your top 10.
Okay, so my top 10, I'll just kick it off with the top two right off the top. I have Foo Fighters as the subtitle as the number one. That's such a rockin' album, Big Me. I mean, there's so many other great songs. Color of the Shape I revisit a lot, mostly because, I mean, maybe it's nostalgia, but it was the first one that I owned, the first Foo Fighter album that I owned, so I'm not afraid to revisit it. I had Wasting Light in third. It's really good. I would have,
good album.
For this week, I might have had it maybe a little bit lower on the list, like maybe 5 or something, but hearing it again, it's like, it's a banger of an album. So I had that one as number 3. I had Sonic Highways as number 4. I thought it was overall pretty solid. There's Nothing Left to Lose. I have it at 5. Concrete and Gold. I love the song Skies and Neighborhood. That song is an amazing single. I never thought I would say that because like over time you kind of you get what you guys are describing, like that whole, I don't know if it's Foo Fighters fatigue, but you just hear it all the time, that mainstream rock in the radio. Or
I think people are, I could be way off on this, but I feel like a lot of people, like just speaking with the three of us, I know we're all friends and we have similar music tastes and whatnot, but I feel like a lot of people kind of fell off in those middle years, and it almost like if you stuck on and continued listening, you're like, oh shit, they kind of have a return to form of Wasting Light, and they've kind of been on that high ever since. And it's almost like a second leg of their career. Or you fell off and you're not even aware of any of the songs on any of these albums beyond the singles. And I do think that some of the singles on some of the albums are not reflective of the album.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point.
They're more reflective of Foo Fighters as opposed to the album.
Yeah, and I think my ranking kind of shows that, like, what is it, Concrete and Gold and Medicine at Midnight, I just heard for the albums from beginning to end for the first time, like this week, or today for Medicine at Midnight. So that's it's a little bit lower on my list just because of, I guess it's still really fresh to me. So sorry, Concrete and Gold was number 5. I had In Your Honor as number 6 because that was the last Foo Fighters album that I bought. But listening to it this week, it's so long. Like it's just hard. Yeah. It's hard. It's like 83 minutes.
And I find like the first 3-4 tracks on the first album are like really good and kind of like different sounding. They have really full guitar sounds and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then by the end, you kind of fall into that whole sameness generic. And then when you get to the second album, it's a lot more chill and you lose that energy, which is what I love about Foo Fighters. I just kind of loses my attention.
Yeah, it was the single that really seemed to drive that album. What was it called? Is it the self-titled?
Like there's are you talking on the first disc?
Best of You.
Yeah, Best of You is the big single off the top.
Yeah. And I remember this is I'm pretty sure I saw them on this tour at the amphitheater, and they were like, "This is the biggest venue we've ever played at before ever." And I was like, "What, really? The Molson Amphitheater in Toronto? This is what they said on stage." So maybe they were lying, but I feel like that they were really getting big. Like that song was big, so it's weird that was the album that we fell off with. Like, how could they be getting big and then?
Well, that Best of You song, I wasn't a big fan of because it was very repetitive in the lyrics. And same with like Times Like These, I found that very repetitive too in the lyrics. It kind of gets like annoying for me personally, but I guess they were huge tracks, probably for the exact reason I found them annoying. But yeah, Gordon, continue your list. Sorry.
And then number 8, I had Medicine at Midnight. I agree. It's like it's pretty short. It's breezy to get through, and it has a lot of variety. Like even just different, I don't know, different sounds or different. It's a little bit. It's not like your standard Foo Fighters album. So I respect that. I had it low because it was my first time hearing it. And then I had Echoes, Silence, Patience, and Grace, and One by One. Other than the singles on One by One, I almost forget that album. Like it didn't really have a lasting impression after listening to cramming them all in this week. I don't know if it's one I would revisit often.
That's why I was saying on my list it was probably only number 5 because of nostalgia, because I was on such a high when that album came out, because I believe it was right after Songs for the Deaf, which was when he worked with Queens of Stone Age. It was almost like a resurgence of like, oh shit, Dave Grohl's back, and he was saying like, I want to be more rockin' on the new album, and then All My Life came out, and that song is like one of my favorite singles by them. And then there was like Breakout, I really liked that, and there's some other tracks I liked. So I don't know, I thought it was a pretty good album, but yeah, it's probably nostalgia mainly why it's so high for me.
Well, Breakout is on the previous album. What are you
Oh,
talking about?
sorry, I'm probably
There,
confused.
no, but because you said it's interesting. You said that times like these you didn't like, and I think it was All My Life and Times Like These were the two singles, right?
Well, I'm
So,
thinking of the song I meant to say was Low.
oh, okay, yeah, yeah. I don't even remember that song.
Really?
All I
Good song?
remember is All My Life and Times Like These from that album.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Times Like These. That was
Hmm.
annoying.
Yeah, for some reason I always thought that album or that song was on In Your Honor, but it wasn't. I guess those years just blur together in my mind because I think that's kind of when I was paying less attention to Foo Fighters. I was probably getting much more
I
into.
think at that point we're listening, like our musical taste when we were in college grew so much. We're listening to more hip hop, indie rock, punk music. There's a
Hmm.
whole bunch of stuff, garage rock, a whole bunch of electronic. So at that point, Foo Fighters wasn't as exciting.
Yeah. Plus, times like these kind of seems like they're trying really hard to have a nostalgic feeling song. It's almost like they're trying too hard. And even
Yeah.
with the guitar riff, it's got I think it's like isn't that taken from like an old Cure song or some song in the 80s that riff is basically ripped off. But
So I guess this can move us on to the next question. Is this the band's peak? I didn't know how to answer this, so I'm interested to hear your answers. Like, I'll just answer off the top. I like this album's. I was going to say this album for the '90s, and it's got the three bangers on it. I mean, it's easy to say that it's this album, but I think over time, my attitude or my thinking of Foo Fighters has kind of shifted. Where I think they've entered a new peak where they have like a respectability, or they have like more respect than they did back then, and I think that carries them. Like off the top, Ryan, you were saying like you didn't know about this band, like you kind of stopped paying attention to them and stuff like that. But I often feel like Dave Grohl or the band, they're like one of those bands, like almost like Robin Williams, like when they're alive, you're like, oh man, these interviews are like, I don't know, or these movies, who knows how they're going. But then when he's gone or when they're gone, it's like, man, I wish I had a Foo Fighters album, or I wish they could just do something. So I don't know how to answer that question. What do you guys think is their peak, if you have an answer for it?
I don't know. It seems like back like around the era of when The Color and the Shape came out and when the like Learn to Fly came out. It seemed like that's when radio wise they were just being played nonstop like everywhere. Like musically they almost seemed the biggest. But now they're such giants, and with the internet and like Dave Grohl's position in this world of how he's like a rock god,
Mm-hmm.
who is considered at this point, it's almost like they've been peaking. Like there hasn't like what rock band that has come out since the Foo Fighters is bigger than the Foo Fighters, especially when you come to like American rock band. Like Radiohead had their moments, Coldplay came out, had their moments, U2 had their resurgence for a while and stuff. Pearl Jam is in and out over the years, but what other American rock band is just always there, always pumping out? It's almost like they've been peaking. They've always been able to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, I would say maybe Pearl
Yeah.
Jam.
Yeah, Pearl Jam is the only other band I can think of, and they're a band that sort of shied away from the public. So it was almost like Foo Fighters is the only '90s rock band still carrying that baton for everyone. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and he's one of those people, like I think Gordon was mentioning it earlier. Like when you see I know for me, if I'm on YouTube and I see like a new interview posted or like a new little live thing posted, I click immediately. It's like, oh, it's probably gonna be pretty good. Like it's probably gonna say something funny and interesting. Yeah. Yeah, like that Sonic Highways album, there's a whole bunch of Trumpy lyrics anti-Trump lyrics.
And I think they performed at Biden's inauguration.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like the go-to rock band. Like I was saying, like if they need a rock, it's like, oh, we're honoring Led Zeppelin. Let's get Foo Fighters to play a Led Zeppelin song. Oh, we're honoring Black Sabbath. Let's get Foo Fighters to play a Black Sabbath song.
And the Queen. Yeah.
Or like, or even if it's not the Foo Fighters, just Dave Grohl with whoever he wants. He's the first phone call. The first phone call is Dave Grohl. Anything rock related, you call Dave Grohl. Even like at the Oscars or whatever a few years ago, I remember he played Blackbird over the In Memoriam. Like, okay, like what other rock artist would you imagine doing that? Just him. Yeah, he offered to do that. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So, sorry, Ryan, did you think this is their peak, or where do you think their peak is?
But you got to remember when the Color and the Shape came out, they literally played at the Lyric in town. So like they were doing small tours, and with them it's weird because you look at like the Color and the Shape sold more than their newer albums, but their newer albums are debuting higher on the charts, and I'd say the band in general is probably more popular than they've ever been. So it's hard to judge, but then like they're more popular now, but it's people are listening to Everlong. It's their most streamed song. Like their top 10 are all like Everlong, The Pretender, Best of You, Learn to Fly, All My Life, My Hero, Walk, Everlong Acoustic, Monkey Wrench, Times Like These. No song from the past 10 years, like other than Walk, which I think was 2012. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing newer.
Mm-hmm.
All just based on, it's just Foo Fighters as a whole. They're not an individual album or song really. They're almost like a full experience. Full. And like, and to be honest, like if I heard a Foo Fighters song and like electronic drum beat dropped, I'd be like, what? I'd be confused. Yeah. No, I do want to say the Dead Mouse remix of Rope is really good.
Oh, really? I'll check that out. I think they did it at an award show. I read somewhere that they've actually done that live together.
Oh, have they? That's funny.
Yeah, I'll YouTube it after, I guess.
Because this was like a few months ago, I was going through some of their stuff and I was like, Rope Dead Mouse mix. I'm like, have I never heard this? I clicked, I'm like, this is actually really good. It's on like the bonus tracks folder on Spotify for Wasting Light. It's good though. I recommend it.
Check it out. So I mean, we've been talking about this the whole time. So where do you place this band in music history? I'll make it more specific, and I'll say this is the first year that they can be inducted into the Hall of Fame. If they were to get inducted to the Hall of Fame, do you think that's on the strength of them as a band, or do you think that's more of like, is Dave Grohl the band, or do you think they've established themselves as like as a 6-piece or a 4-piece band, and it's not about Dave Grohl?
I think it's the band because like their songs are still Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl's never really taken ownership of anything. He always talks about it as a band. Even like that first album is all him. And whenever you read any quote of him talking about the Color and the Shape, he's always we, even referring to the first album. Like on the first album, we did this. Now we want to do this. But it's like it was him. He doesn't think of it like that. I think he himself, like Gordon, you touched on earlier, he likes being part of that band. So for him, it's all band. And I think it shows like that too. I never take like I imagine if Dave Grohl was to do solo stuff, it'd be different, and it has been. Like when he did Probot, which is more of like a solo, more he's just working with a bunch of people. He had like metal songs, he had different types of songs. So I think the Foo Fighters is Foo Fighters. It isn't Dave Grohl.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess the flip side of that too is like when Nirvana got inducted, it's like people think of Kurt Cobain first. They don't, and Dave Grohl's second or even third down the line. And maybe Foo Fighters, this is Dave Grohl. Like it's his baby. It's his baby. It's not him. It's like he's the band, right?
It's his baby, but like when you're part of a band, it's kind of like a different dynamic. Like, I don't know, like if I was in a band and someone came with a song and we all kind of worked on it, yeah, they came with the song, maybe the frame of it, but we all kind of put our own flair on it. If I wasn't in, if Nate wasn't in the room or Taylor wasn't in the room or Pat wasn't in the room, the song may have sounded a little different or came out a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he just knows how to keep a band together. So he's talking we all the time because he knows that if everybody has credit for what they're making, everybody's personally invested, and then the band is gonna stick together, unless somebody does heroin and dies.
And he's dealt with royalty issues in the past.
Well, I don't think Dave Grohl's like at this point, especially at this point, he has nothing left to prove. Like,
no,
what does he have?
He didn't have anything to prove getting into it, so he was already a star. So
yeah, I did read though the one thing he did want to be in front because he got so many offers to be a drummer for other bands, including like Pearl Jam and Tom Petty and all that stuff. But he wanted to do his own thing, so he knew that was clear, and he wanted to.
Yeah, because at that point it made sense for him because, like, especially if he was playing these songs for people, like a lot of those, like that first album, why would he want to take a step back? This is his opportunity, and like. Would Foo Fighters have existed without Nirvana? Probably not. But he made the best of his opportunity and he lived up to it. He made good albums. He made good songs. He's done it forever. Like he never stopped. Think from the first time you heard Smells Like Teen Spirit when that song dropped in 1991 until today, Dave Grohl has been part of music. Like there's been no moment in that 30 years where there was that big of a break. He was always doing something, whether it was Nirvana, Foo Fighters, them Crooked Vultures, playing drums for whomever, doing a documentary for Showtime. Like he's always doing something, like with music and to further music and to help rock music history and the future of rock music. Like these documentaries he's doing is obviously to show the history of the music he grew up with and loved.
Yeah.
I think the only comparison I was trying to think of, like who else has had like a similar kind of path through music, and the only two I could honestly think of, and it's not even in rock, it's in rap or hip hop, would be like Dr. Dre or Ice Cube, like leaving a super massive group that blew up, and then they went on and had successful solo careers. And then also like you have the whole financial side or like the Beats by Dre, and then you have Ice Cube with his movies and all that stuff. So I don't think there's many people that have had, I don't know if it's luck or if it's like talent to do that.
It happened a lot in the older days. A lot of rock singers started off in bands and then later on, I'm blanking right now on names, but it isn't out of the question for that to happen. Even like
Eric Clapton, one of them.
Yeah, Eric Clapton is from Cream, and like even Led Zeppelin came out of was a band with Eric Clapton in it. Not Eric Clapton in it. I'm fucking blanking. I wasn't prepared for this convo, but it's a recurring thing in rock music where a band will break up and members will go on to start other bands. It isn't unheard of.
Right.
But I don't think anyone's ever risen to his height. Maybe you can make the argument Phil Collins with pop music in the 80s went from the drummer of a rock band to leading a pop band, but that's a whole other thing. And he played drums for Led Zeppelin and they did not like it very much.
No.
But yeah, I know it's not unheard of, but I don't think we've ever seen one to this extent. And even like Lionel Richie was part of a band, or Diana Ross was part of a band, if you want to get into like R&B and different genres.
Yeah.
Yeah. one random piece of trivia, kind of just to throw onto that, is this is from 2012, so Dave Grohl might be in a different spot now, but it was estimated that he's the third wealthiest drummer in the world behind Ringo Starr and Phil Collins. So that was almost 10 years ago. So who knows well, I doubt he's beating Ringo Starr, but
yeah, I would be curious to know how much of his revenue comes from his drumming and how much
Yeah.
of it comes from his guitar playing and singing, because like he could have easily taken any of those drummer gigs and been the drummer of a band, but nobody was probably going to hire him for singing or playing guitar. So he had to start the Foo Fighters to do that.
Well, what do you think here's a question. What do you think he makes more money on? Foo Fighters royalties or Nirvana royalties?
I'll say Foo Fighters, because I have a feeling like Nirvana, he's probably like 25% or somewhere less, maybe.
And also like
a third.
And also I believe Nirvana credits are like lyrics by Kurt Cobain, music by Nirvana or whatever, whereas Foo Fighters it's all just Foo Fighters or him individually.
Yeah, he's got more
level where it's like Kurt Cobain is Nirvana. Like
that's probably a better argument.
Usually, like typically, you would split it like in the court cases often they'll split it with lyrics has a copyright and the chords have a copyright and the drummer gets shit. So I mean, unless you split the whole thing as a band, it sounds like that's what they did with Nirvana. It's a common thing to do.
Yeah. So I guess this kind of wraps us up. Did you guys have any final thoughts before we ask the question?
Shoot.
All right. Do you guys think this album's essential? Who wants to go first, or you want me to kick it off?
You can kick it off if you want.
All right, sure. So yeah, I'll say it is essential. I mean, it's a pretty good album. It's one of the first ones that I bought, so I got definitely a nostalgia angle. I would say the first one is definitely essential, but this one has like the three biggest post-grunge singles of the 90s. Like there's no denying it. It's on every playlist, those three songs. So yeah, I say it's essential. It's essential 90s rock or post-grunge 90s album, however you want to look at it. I think it's a pretty solid album. It stands on its own, no matter what era you're coming at it from.
Yeah, to go off that, I'd have to agree. Like, Foo Fighters, they're just such an important band that, and when it comes to them, this album specifically, just because it did spawn those big singles, and a song like Everlong has, just surpassed any of the thoughts I thought it would ever reach in heights of popularity. So, and just to know where that song came from or where the band came from, because a lot, like we were saying, that first album is a little different than the rest, whereas I feel like this is when the Foo Fighters sort of became the Foo Fighters that the music sort of built off of. That first album was more like a demo, and this was the full Foo Fighters package.
Which is interesting because the demo is number 1 on all of our lists.
Well, because it's so raw and so much energy, and it's more to our liking.
Yeah, I think even like our tastes in music, all the albums that we've talked about in the past and the way we talk about them, I think there's like a strong we're pointing at liking that one the best just for what it is. Like we picked In Utero out of Nirvana albums.
Yeah,
that's true. But I'm gonna buck the trend and say that this one is not essential. Like, I know what you guys are saying, but most of your justifications seem to come from the few songs that were amazing, like the hit singles, which are great. But I think the album as a whole just has too many filler tracks. Like I've got quite a few skip tracks on it, so I can't imagine saying, hey, you want to know about the Foo Fighters, you gotta listen to this. But hold on, just after this track, and then this one's good, but then maybe but
that's
for that reason I would say this is not essential.
But that's the full Foo Fighters experience. Like I was touching on earlier, like, yeah, you might look at these songs and say they're redundant, but at the time they really weren't. They were pretty, like, they weren't the best songs. I'm not saying they were better at any point. Like, they weren't amazing and they're not amazing anymore. But the album is still solid. Like, there may be skip tracks now, but when they came out, they were pretty fresh and they were pretty hot. Like Hey Johnny Park, I loved that song when I first heard it. Yeah, I may skip it now, and when it comes to Foo Fighters, they're such an important band that there has to be something left. You can't just, it can't just be the singles. they're way too important to be like, oh, they're just stripped down to the singles. And I don't know. It seems like it's more just you're not the biggest fan of Foo Fighters anymore. You're just
so it's not essential.
Like but you're just like to say, oh, they're not important. They didn't do anything different. When meantime they became the biggest rock band of their generation.
I didn't say they're not important. They didn't do anything different. That's not. But I'll just say that this album, to be an essential album, can't have that many filler tracks. Like it has to be.
Yeah, but I don't think it has as many. Like there's maybe
okay, that's fair. Fair enough.
Maybe one or two.
Okay, I'm sitting on the 3 or 4 range, and at that point, it's like an essential album.
I'm just defending.
I think it just hit for me too many filler tracks. Just right on the border to like. And I know you don't want to have them stripped down to the singles, but think about a greatest hits, a Foo Fighters greatest hits album. That'd be pretty solid.
But again, like but even in a greatest hits album, if you took all their big singles, there's still singles of theirs I don't like Times Like These. I don't like. So the full what I'm trying to say is the full Foo Fighters experience is this. So when you're talking about Foo Fighters, I'm going to recommend you a Foo Fighters album for you to understand who Foo Fighters are, and you're like, oh, there's a couple tracks I don't like. Yes, anticipate that going forward.
All right, fine, but if there's an album I'm going to recommend to Foo Fighters because I want to convince them that Foo Fighters are good, I will give them the first album.
But I would think that's not the best representation of.
No, it isn't. But if I'm just trying to get them started on something that's good, that's what I'll give them.
Yeah, I would. You just almost took the words out of my mouth. Is it fair to say the first album because that's like the unicorn, or it's the first one? It's nothing like everything else.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
I would say this one is like the best of what they became.
Honestly, I know we've all picked the first one, and when I looked at other people, what their thoughts on the first one too, I see a lot of mixed, and I almost feel like our connection to the first one is purely because of how we were introduced to the band, and the era it's coming from. But I don't think, like, as much as I like that first album, I do not think it's a good representation of the Foo Fighters, who they are, who they became afterwards. Like, there's very little that's still in the Foo Fighters sound from that first album. That could almost be like a different band.
It's probably a good representation of what Dave Grohl is.
Yes.
Not them as a band.
Yes.
Or what he was like way back then.
Well, I mean, he still jumps on other bands and stuff like that too. Like, I don't think he shies away from that rawness if he's on his own. Like, he just doesn't do a Foo Fighters.
Yeah. I just can't have a skip track as track 2 or 3 or whatever that track is. So I don't know.
Hey, Johnny Park is enough to make it non-essential for you.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much that's what killed it.
Cool. Well, yeah, no, it's good to have difference opinion. We split this week. I think we've been unanimous for like the last few weeks, so it's good to have some mixed reactions.
Yeah.
So I guess that wraps it up for this week, unless you guys have anything else to throw on in the end.
No.
What more is to say about Foo Fighters? So I guess this takes us. Oh, sorry.
I think we said it all.
Said it all. So I guess this helps us. This will continue on with our Dave Grohl through line. Next week we're going to be doing Queens of the Stone Age. Is that right?
Songs for the Deaf.
Nice. Yeah.
Can't even hear it.
What's the saga? I need this. Okay, we got to always say this for next week. Yeah. So thanks for joining.
For you, it's Songs for the Deaf. I'll stop.
So yeah, thanks for joining us this week. If like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate watching live with us. And you can catch us on Anchor and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Original music by Ryan Dugal and artwork by Vincent Tran.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next time.
Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you can follow people.
And comment. Yep. We always like to hear the feedback, please.
Yep.
Please do. Peace out.
All right. Take care.